America is back. America is back. Diplomacy is back at the center of our foreign policy.
So this was U.S. President Joe Biden's first speech about foreign policy since taking office, and it's called America's Place in the World. And when he says America's back, what is he talking about? I guess he means back to what was going on under Obama, Biden. But when you really think about it, that's exactly what was going on under Trump as well. And the only thing that really changed was the lip service Trump paid to the notion that he was actually going to stop all the endless wars that the U.S. was fighting and all of the interference the U.S. is involved in around the globe.
There can be no doubt, in a democracy, force should never seek to overrule the will of the people or attempt to erase the outcome of a credible election. The Burmese military should relinquish power they have seized, release the advocates and activists and officials they have detained, lift the restrictions on telecommunications, and refrain from violence. We will work with our partners to support restoration of democracy and the rule of law and impose consequences on those responsible.
And the first country that Biden vows to interfere in since becoming president is Myanmar. And yes, indeed, the military in Myanmar overthrew the government there, led by Aung San Suu Kyi and her National League for Democracy political party. But what Biden's not mentioning is that that government is not the product of democracy, democracy being a process of self-determination. The U.S. has spent decades and millions upon millions of dollars putting Aung San Suu Kyi into power. She is a product of foreign interference, not democracy. So if the military was wrong to remove her, the U.S. was wrong to install her into power in the first place. He's not going to mention this. And then he talks about holding people accountable for what happened in Myanmar. How is the internal political affairs of Myanmar any of America's business all the way on the other side of the world?
I made it clear to President Putin that the days of the United States rolling over in the face of Russia's aggressive actions, interfering with our elections, cyber attacks, poisoning its citizens, are over.
Here is Biden threatening Russia, and he picks three things that we know for a fact are lies. Election meddling. There was a 2-year investigation in the U.S. No evidence whatsoever that Russia interfered in U.S. elections. Cyber attacks, notoriously hard to attribute, and again, the U.S. has no evidence that Russia did any of that. As a matter of fact, cybersecurity companies presenting reports to the U.S. Congress about alleged Russian activity, in U.S. information and cyberspace actually got caught engaged in cyber attacks and coordinated inauthentic behavior posing as Russians. So that really makes you think. And then finally, the poisoning of Alexei Navalny. There is no evidence that Russia did that and no convincing argument as to why they would do that. Conversely, the U.S. had him there in Germany after he was poisoned and used him as an excuse to put pressure on Germany to block the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And it's no secret that the U.S. has been trying to block that for years. And Biden and his U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, have vowed to continue trying to stop the pipeline.
We'll also take on directly the challenges posed by our prosperity, security, and democratic values by our most serious competitor, China. We'll confront China's economic abuses, counter its aggressive, coercive action to push back on China's attack on human rights, intellectual property, and global governance.
And here is Biden on China. And he's acting as if China, economic abuses, what abuses would that be? It's just outcompeting the US. He's talking about human rights abuses and attacks on intellectual property. Again, this is the US making things up to tilt the playing field in its favor.
We're also stepping up our diplomacy to end the war in Yemen. And to underscore our commitment, we are ending all American support for offensive operations in the war in Yemen, including relevant arms sales.
Here's Biden talking about ending the war in Yemen. But people should remember that it was Obama Biden who started the war in the first place, who began arming the Saudis and its regional allies to carry out their offensive against Yemen. And then Biden says he's going to stop arms sales, relevant arms sales. Did you catch that? That means he's not going to stop selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. He's just going to make it look like, oh, well, we're not going to give you this weapon because you might use it in Yemen. But of course, any weapon, any sort of military deal made with Saudi Arabia is going to enhance its ability to continue carrying out its war with Yemen. And when he talks about ending the war in Yemen, he doesn't mean unconditionally. He means conditionally, and conditionally as serving the interests of the US with the regime that they want put into power. That is why the whole war is being fought in the first place. So just a completely dishonest feign for peace there.
If we invest in ourselves and our people, if we fight to ensure that American businesses are positioned to compete and win on the global stage, if the rules of international trade aren't stacked against us, if our workers and intellectual property are protected, then there's no country on earth, not China or any other country on earth, that can match us.
And here's Biden saying no one else in the world can match the US, as long as the rules aren't stacked against them. And, throughout his speech, he alludes to the notion of equality among all people. And if that's true, if Biden really believes that, then China, with a population many times larger than the US, with plenty of resources, there's no reason why China couldn't be a stronger, bigger, more powerful country than the US, unless you're trying to say that Chinese people aren't as smart as Americans. But that's exactly what Biden is saying. That's what the US establishment thinks. It's American exceptionalism. They are the best country on earth. They are superior. All other nations are beneath them. That's what he's saying. And when he's talking about, the rules not being stacked against the US, again, we have to remember, he's not talking about making the playing field level. He's talking about stacking the rules against everybody else, and we can see that's all the US does.
America cannot afford to be absent any longer on the world stage. We are a country that does big things. American diplomacy makes it happen, and our administration is ready to take up the mantle and lead once again.
Back in reality, the US is a country that has hundreds of military bases all around the globe. They are illegally occupying countries like Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. They are waging covert and semi-covert war from Africa, across the Middle East, and into Central Asia. It is a country through the National Endowment for Democracy that is interfering in the internal political affairs of virtually every country on earth. This is a country that presumes leadership over the entire planet. President Biden just said so in his own speech. This is a country that represents a modern-day empire and a foreign policy not driven by the American voting public, but by unelected special interests. And this is a foreign policy that is not going to stop until people make it stop. And it's not going to be through voting. It's going to be through building the multipolar world to counterbalance the international order the United States is always talking about and always trying to impose on the rest of the world. So I hope that makes it clear. I hope nobody out there is still holding their breath waiting for US President Joe Biden to radically change the direction of the United States. He basically just promised that that's not going to happen, that the wars and the interference are going to continue unabated, and if he has anything to say about it, will actually expand. So if you thought the video was useful, please like and share it. Think about subscribing to my channel. It helps the channel grow, and it's totally free to do. Check the video description below for the links referenced in this video, as well as for ways you can help support my work, like by becoming a Patreon member. And as always, thank you for watching.